Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. Today on the podcast, we are going to be talking to Siena Dexter. She is from SmashBrand, and this is a great podcast, you guys, because it's fun to collaborate and kind of talk deep about brand and the journey on how to get there. So SmashBrand, they focus on package design for the food industry, and I think a lot of people think there's a differentiation between different industries and different targets really. But from a design, creative, brand building perspective, a lot of the journey and the ingredients on how to get there are very similar. So in this podcast, in this episode, we have a great conversation. We talk through some of those things and she gives us a little bit of her perspective on how Smash Brand does this. So without further ado, enjoy this podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. Today on the podcast, we have Siena Dexter from SmashBrand. Siena is what's your title, Siena?
Director of Strategy.
Director of Strategy. So let's talk about that. Tell me a little bit about your role and let's talk about kind of the difference of kind of branding strategy and the approach to kind of food packaging design.
So quite a few questions there. So I'll tell you about the role first of all. So what does a director of strategy do? Obviously directing the strategy across the company. We work predominantly with fast moving consumer goods. Food and beverage is something that we do a lot, though not restricted to that. In terms of how we've grown as a business over the last couple of years, we've taken quite a big leap from working predominantly with products that are kind of going to shelf and perhaps using consumer testing in order to navigate that, in order to help our clients do that better and continue to grow and use various ways to help us to predetermine how those decisions are going to be made. So this is kind of a long-winded way of kind of explaining what the role is, moving from testing how different pieces of packaging will perform and perhaps kind of going straight from brief to packaging to testing. We've now grown the strategy arm and we're continuing to grow that. So the testing we're doing and the understanding we have of how consumers are behaving happens right at the start of the process for us. And that's, I suppose, where I come in. It's helping our customers to understand, or our clients even to understand, what is really at the heart of why audiences are buying. It could be that they've been selling a certain brand of mayonnaise for a very long time and they say, everyone, people love us, we're great, we're seen as, synonymous with mayonnaise. They say pasta, and I can't say the brand name yet because it hasn't launched. Perhaps they're performing really well in certain states, in certain towns within certain states, but they're still losing market share. So our job is to determine why that is, look at the overall picture and help them to take a step back. So this is all part of strategy. It's going, okay, how do we move away from the product you're selling, the story you're telling, and then move out of that and understand what's the big tension here? Like, what are people seeing when they go to the store? Why are they picking that up? Why is that the automatic choice? What are they seeing when they look at your packaging? And how can we make that switch visually and verbally to move it from where it is to where it should be, and then rigorously testing that to make sure that it's landing.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
So my question is, what are the ingredients of that strategy? Because I think there's a part of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a part of it that there's the consumer mindset, the pattern,
Yeah.
the behavior. There's something that's psychological that's going into this as well. But are you obviously taking that and then marrying that to the visual, whether or not it's a really slick font presentation versus a mascot versus like how far and what ingredients are going into that strategy to get you to the point of here's the idea and here's the best place for you to succeed?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. We would usually keep it pretty loose. I mean, there's a couple of ways to answer this question. First of all, I want to answer the tail end of the question first. In how far do we position brands to say, should you have a mascot? Should you have a light font? Should you use illustrations? We want to keep that broad. Our process works by giving a variety of different visual and verbal executions. So we want to know whether a certain palette is maybe working over another. We want to know if a certain illustration is working. mascots are something that we really like playing with. I think it's super fun, but also a great way to have consumer recall, because I'll go, oh, it's that podcast with the dogs. When I'm thinking about this one, I'll be like, yes, cyber dogs, I remember that one. So I think what we try and do is really keep it as broad as possible when we're giving a brand strategy. What we're thinking about isn't necessarily in terms of how it should look. Otherwise, we're really narrowing down the options. We want to keep it broad in terms of what is the overall feeling? What is the tension that consumers are experiencing in their lives right now? And this is leading me on to the first part of your question, which is what are the elements that go into it? So first of all, we need to understand what is the goal of the project we're trying to achieve. So are we trying to gain market share, or are we trying to educate consumers on why they need raw dog food, or why they need human grade food, or why they should choose this brand over another brand, or whether adaptogen mushrooms are something that they should choose over coffee? So we need to think about that in the greater context. We then need to identify the audience. So that's another kind of input to strategy. So we have secondary research, primary research, understanding when you're thinking of tea, or let's say tea or hot chocolate. Actually, let's say coffee. What do you think? Coffee. You think, oh, it's energizing, it wakes me up, it helps me focus. But then maybe actually coffee also helps you to have that moment to yourself, that moment to relax, that time away from if you're really focusing. And it's an exercise in comfort when you put the kettle on. You take a break away, you put the kettle on, you've got that ritual. So there's so much in that we would build out in terms of consumer habits and how those are changing. Those are all the inputs. We then work out what is the main tension. What is the tension we're solving for? What is stopping people from potentially buying the product that we want, or connecting with a brand that could be great for them? We then connect that to an overall strategy. So the strategy is, how do we solve that problem? It would usually look like something like, if we're doing a brand strategy, would be an overall story of what are we going to be telling, as a brand? Like, what's the story? What's the hook? What's the problem? And that helps the client to understand where we're coming from in a way that isn't just, here's a load of data, I'm going to read it to you until you go cross-eyed, and then you'll just agree with it. We found that doesn't really help to give that emotional hook for clients and help them feel like part of the process. And then I'm coming up to the last bit now. Then after that, we will break it down into a couple of different territories that would work with the problem we're trying to solve. So here's the problem. Let's think of a brand we're working on recently, a brand of cookies. What's the problem with cookies? People are being told that they shouldn't be eating sugar, that they should be cutting down on things that are bad for them, that they should be healthy and good and wear Lululemon and go to spin class and, have their green juice every morning. But sometimes you just want a cookie. Sometimes you just want to indulge. So how do we do that? Do we dial up, the idea of sin, the idea of be sinful, be naughty, do what you want? Or do we say, what if we're changing the idea of what is good? What if we think about it a different way? What if we think good is also having fun? Good is letting yourself go. Good is letting yourself enjoy and be confident. So the way I'm explaining it now, we have a couple of different ways that we can approach the problem, which is people think sugar is bad, but they want to eat it. So we identify the problem, and then we find a couple of different ways that the brand can solve that. And then after that, we let our creative team loose to explore that and come back with how they would interpret it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question to that,
Yeah.
and then I'm gonna explain kind of why I'm asking. So what does that research or that process look like? Is that, people in front of the computer researching what's out there, who's doing what, and kind of finding what the industry is telling us? Or are you guys creatively sitting in a room kind of hashing it out based off of the pain points and what problems you're trying to solve? Or what is it, a more organic discovery process, or is it more digital?
There's several elements to that. There's several things that we need in order to do the research. We obviously need to do the research into trend reports. We obviously need to know what the category is saying. We obviously need to know what are the other options out there in terms of what consumers are looking at on the shelf. So, your usual store visits, Mintel reports. We also combine that with primary research for some projects. We have a tiered structure. So we have something for everyone. Not everybody wants to go so in depth with a consumer testing. Perhaps they want some, but they perhaps can't stretch to having the initial primary consumer testing. Ideally, we would be testing intent before we even go to the strategy. So we know what people think when you say coffee, dog food, mayonnaise, cookies. We understand what the relationship is with those products and what's bugging them. And then we use that to help us to identify the hook. From that, yes, it is quite an organic process. It's a lot of kind of head scratching, sitting up at night going, what's the real problem here? Can we dig a little bit deeper? Always asking ourselves, is that really a problem? Can we justify it? Can we really say that's a true statement, that people are really fed up of being told what to do? And you know what? Yes, they are. That people are being told not to eat sugar and sometimes they want to. Yes, that is absolutely true. That women are told to not eat as many carbs, to cut down on their sugar, to look a certain way, to behave a certain way, to not stuff their face with muffins. Yes, that absolutely is. And how can we get around that? So it's getting to that hook of it and finding that true statement that can connect with people.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the reason why I was asking, because I think that journey to get there is important. And I think whether you're a marketing person, a client, or even an artist, I think it's interesting and insightful to hear other people's processes. And part of the reason why I was asking was because I think my process is similar to yours, but how I get there, like when I work with clients on creating brands, it's 99% about that discovery process and it's 1% about the execution. And we get credit for the execution. We get credit for the logo, for the brand, like, oh my God, you guys are great designers and all this stuff. And it's like, I appreciate that. And I hope that's true, but it's everything that went into that
Yeah.
really got us there. And when we create brands and do those things, similar to what you were saying, we let the client lead us there. I mean, we might be the one asking the question of what your pain points are and what problem you're trying to solve and what are you looking for? What are you attracted to? All these different things. But it's their answers that kind of help us craft the direction. So like a lot of times, again, we get credit for you guys are so creative. And it's like, well, I'd like to think we are again, but they gave us all the answers. So we got to basically take whatever they gave us. And then that's what we have to work with because there is an industry goal, right? We want to fit in and we want to stand out and we want to shine, in that industry or in that space. But the client, it also has to mirror the client's wants, needs, and pain points. So
Absolutely.
we
I
said it
think that
differently, but it's similar. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think that like strategy is by far the biggest, as well as copywriting, is the biggest unsung hero of branding, really. You say you do branding, and that's usually synonymous with graphic design,
Yeah.
when really that is not, we know that's not branding. Branding is all the stuff you don't see. That means that your graphic design or your copywriting is going to make that connection. Otherwise, you're just pulling it out of thin air. We know that it's a hard thing to say, to try and convince people of it. Like, why do we need strategy? We've just got, we have a designer, but I think when brands know, they know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, for anybody who listens to my podcast on the regular, so those three people, I'm kidding, but those people, they've heard me say this before, that there's a big difference between a brand and a logo.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with logos, but logos have a shallow existence and they don't necessarily have the substance, the strategy and the roots behind it that kind of give it a long lasting life. And a brand, although a logo is part of a brand, when you flush out that strategy, that backstory, that meaning, that extra substance that accompanies that logo, now you've got something that can tell stories for eons and
Yeah.
it's something you can speak passionately about. It's something that resonates back to the core of what it is that you do in your industry. And there's just so much, like you said, it's everything that lives kind of behind the curtains that I think really makes it work. And I don't know if everybody realizes that. So like when we meet with clients and when we take on projects, I mean, it's just mandatory in our process, but we try to educate them on that so that they understand the importance, because when they kind of take that logo, take that brand, when they leave our process, we want them to be proud of the work that we did, but also understand the depth of what they have.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, that helps them to communicate what their brand stands for better. So when they have maybe an investor or a client or a customer or a buyer that's saying, okay, tell me in 3 seconds or 30 seconds, or, tell me your elevator pitch. What are you about? What makes you special? I've been asked that once before. It's horrible when you get put on the spot like that. And you're like, if you've done the groundwork behind it, in a few seconds you can say, or in a line, you can say, this is us. This is what makes us special. This is why you should choose us. And I think that's the same for any medium, really, whether it's a website, a package design, or any other kind of way of marketing. It was interesting to me that you talked about copywriting and tone and voice guides that you put together as well for your clients. That's something that we do as well. And it's something that we've only started really doing in depth recently, but that's kind of part of the evolution from a graphic design or packaging to a kind of deep brand development that is multifaceted and really kind of helps our clients to communicate, because you can't just communicate with images alone, right? If we turn the audio off on this podcast, it would not be as interesting.
Well, it's, I don't want to say lazy, but I think it's comfortable for people to just adopt that monkey see, monkey do mindset, in
Yeah.
that when they look at the competitors or the people in their industry, they just, they go out, they spot check 4, 5, 6 different websites, and they think, well, that's apparently how I need to talk. That's what I need
Yeah.
to say. I'm going to talk like them. I'm going to blend in. And it's too easy for them to kind of fall into that trap. And what I always bring them back to is that the reason why we like people, the reason why we are attracted to different people, whether it's romantically, friendships, whatever it is because we're all different and we have things to say and we say them differently and they tie back to this and they connect over to this. And then, oh, by the way, it's a bird's nest of information that you have to unravel when you're getting to know somebody and really deciding whether or not they're your people. And a brand is the same way. So don't suppress or hide all those unique variables, bring them to the surface, and then talk like that. Like make them part of your copy, make them part of your narrative, because not only will you stand out, but the people who actually consume your brand will know how different you are. And they're going to be like, wow, this is interesting. This is the kind of company I want to work with, or this is not the
Be like,
company I want to
something.
work with. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's fine
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But if you want to put yourself out there in a way that's authentic and really checks all the boxes from visual to voice to whatever, you have to bring those items to the surface. And, I've had clients say, well, we're not that unique. We're not that different. And it's like, dude, we're all different. Like as people to say like, I'm just like everybody else. No, you're not. Everybody's different. Whether you like to admit it or not, it's a thing. You just have to find what those things are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a process of discovery. I think that even if we're talking about brand values or brand voice, a lot of companies or brands can lean on saying we're trustworthy, we're honest, we have good quality products. And it's tough to say, but important to say, so what?
Dude,
Everybody has a good quality product. I sure as hell hope you have a good quality product. Otherwise, what are you even doing selling it to people?
you just
Have
tore
a good
off.
quality product. And then what?
You're right. You just tore off a huge scab for me. Seriously. Like I have this conversation a lot because most companies, they want to just jump to those core value things. They want to like, what, tell me about your company. Well, we're honest and we have integrity and we have quality. And it's like, well, okay, but I'm not giving you credit for honesty because you should be honest. You don't
You
get
don't
points for that.
lie.
Yeah. You don't get points for that. And having integrity, well, again, no points. You should have integrity because that's how we should consume and how we should operate business. And as far as quality, again, that's not really up for negotiations. You have to bring quality. So no, you don't get credit for that either. And monkey see, monkey do, lazy, whatever you want to say, that's where we want to jump. We want to jump to those core values. We want to jump to, even the word, we're authentic. Well,
Authentic.
you should be. Like, I use the word because I'm trying to get you there as a feeling, but I don't think you should use the word because all you're really saying is, I had the option to not be who I am and lie to you in this process, but I actually chose to be honest and you're welcome. No.
Like being phony is an option. We are
Yeah,
not
no.
phony.
Yeah,
Everyone else is phony. Like
right.
what?
Yeah, if you're lucky I decided not to be phony, you're welcome. No, that's not how this works. So, no, when you mentioned that, I'm like, oh my God, she's reading my mind because you can go there. That's not that you can't have core values. You can, but those are not ingredients in how you
No,
present your
and
brand.
they're not. And I think that's why it's important to work with an agency, to work with someone that does this every day, because we can spot those things that we know that are the almost the cliche, because you've seen them so many times. If you're not aware of cliches, or if you don't immerse yourself in brands every day, how are you going to spot them? How are you going to know? And I think that's so important. It is so important. It's about
It's
digging a little bit deeper. And like, I get it. I do actually get it. I think we work with so many talented founders and so many talented businesses. Some of them, have been around since, for decades, and they've been doing well, selling great based on family recipes. They've, done amazingly online and they want to switch to retail and they've got a great product. And I get it. When they want to say why people love them, they say, honestly, we do a fantastic product and it works. And that's why people buy us because they know it. But as well as that, we need to move past that. So I get why that's a go-to. I get why when you put your heart and soul into making a product, you just want to tell people about it. But it's our job to get you to think a little bit further.
Yeah. And I think the distinction there for me is that those things can be a positioning tool, but
Yeah.
they're not a sales tool.
No.
Like don't buy from me because I'm honest. Well,
Yeah.
you should be. I mean, come on. Like, I mean, do I get it cheaper if you lie to me or how does that work? So
True. It's true. It is almost quite an easy step to make though. And I think it's something that comes along with just having seen Brown say, we're honest, we're good, we're trustworthy. It's like the step away from that, or the next step above that is we're trustworthy or we're trustworthy because we're not big food, because we're small and keep it that way, so it's giving that why, giving that so what, expanding on that adds the personality and uniqueness.
yeah, I mean, I definitely can see how they get there and the comfortability of, checking those boxes and being like, sweet, we got that done. But the challenge then, coming from me or somebody like you is that you think a little harder. If you completely solved your brand's problems in 15, 20 minutes, you didn't think hard enough. We got to keep going and see what else is there. Because, and again, not that those things can't exist. They certainly can, but there's always more to that story. So,
Absolutely.
so,
Absolutely. I
so
completely agree.
tell me about, SmashBrand. Tell me kind of what your company is about, where are you located, what, kind of how
All
people
about
find
it.
you.
I'll tell you all about it.
Okay.
So we're based in Idaho, although as you can tell from my accent, I am not based in Idaho. They found me in London. So we do have kind of a free range kind of policy where people can work from wherever they want, even though we do have a hub of where we're based and where a lot of our clients are based as well, actually. So what we do special is we do consumer testing. So qualitative consumer testings to help our clients, who are mainly fast moving consumer goods, to perform better on shelf. The biggest challenge for packaged goods is, unlike digital products or digital websites or digital ads where you can A/B split test, you can very easily collect the ROI, you know if something's working, and you also haven't perhaps invested as much in it because it's online. You can have two versions. You can very easily switch a headline over. With packaging, a lot more goes into it.
Yeah.
If you're printing out thousands of packs or labels, you've already invested so much money that you need to be absolutely sure that everything on the front of the pack, on the sides, on the back, the substrate, how it's designed, what bottle you put it in, you need to be 100% sure that's going to be connecting with people. So that's what we do. We bring the assurance of knowing how your product's going to perform through quantitative testing to our graphic design process and our packaging design process.
Is there a niche or a food industry that you migrate to? Is it more organics versus, I don't know,
We
cold
work on
cereals or what?
so many different things. We work on so many different things. I think a lot of companies that we're working with recently tend to be more kind of healthier, better for you products. That is just a general trend with how brands are evolving.
Yeah.
Even if they weren't a better for you brand, they perhaps want to be better because people are just trying to be better, making better choices. And we're aware that's what our consumers want as well.
Yeah.
They're looking to make those choices as well. So it could be better for you dog food that's organic, which is actually one that we are working on at the moment. I can't mention any names with that. Or it could be food within food and drink. It could be adaptogens was kind of a big thing that we were working on for quite a while with several different companies, whether it's kind of morning elixirs that have got lots of L-theanine and adaptogen mushrooms in them to help you focus better, to vitamin infused drinks, coffee alternatives. And now was a big phase where a lot of brands were doing that and launching that. But we're lucky to have a wide variety of different products that we work on. We worked on one recently within the DIY space. Our client had invented a really fantastic, it's not a gadget, it's a tool. Again, I can talk about this at length, perhaps if we have a follow-up podcast once it's actually launched, but I'm going to wait for that, which does something completely different that nothing else is doing at the moment. And they just wanted to tell that story better on pack as they launch in retail. So that's just to give you a flavor of the kind of things that we are working on.
So how far do you guys go in the process? Obviously there's the discovery and there's probably the creation.
Way.
Yeah. Do you go all the way to production of that packaging? And then what happens after that? Do you go as far as website design?
I'll say not all the way. We do go all the way to providing the finished files for the client to go to their printer. We do kind of like in the same way that you have partners that you work with in your extended network. We obviously, if our clients aren't sure of who to go with for either even formulations for their product or certain buyers or the certain connections that they want us to make, we can. Printers, advice on substrate, packaging, different ways that they could be printing out labels, etc. That's something that we could absolutely do. But a lot of the time, the clients we work with already have a manufacturer. They already have a way of printing the labels. They already have a good relationship with the printer. So really all they want is the finished art files. So we would kind of work with them to bring that project to life, but really we kind of end at the file delivery stage and the kind of finished brand guideline stage.
Well, that's awesome. So tell me, what's your favorite project? What's the one that you're like, this is probably one of the coolest projects we've ever done?
Oh God, that's difficult.
I suppose it's like picking your favorite child, right?
There is one that I absolutely can't talk about yet.
Okay, well, let's do this. Let's bring you back to talk about that one when you can.
I would absolutely love that. And we can actually do that in about, I will let you know, but we could potentially do that in about a month because I think they're so close to launching. And that's going to be an amazing project. We can do a whole podcast on it. It's in an industry that is growing, and I've left a hint in that word. Growing.
Okay. All right. Well, I've actually never left people on a cliffhanger before. So you're the first cliffhanger we've ever had on this podcast. So
amazing.
So Siena, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I guess we'll probably talk to you in about a month.
Great. I would love that. Fantastic. Right. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye.
If you'd like to learn more about CyberDogs, share your thoughts, or even ask a specific question about this episode and or the brand retro mindset, contact me directly at mike@cyberdogsmarketing.com.